Okay, so let's take a look at your third essay, which is an explication of a poem essay. Check for the due dates. The length is between 700 to 1300. So this one could be a little bit shorter. And I do that just because I don't want you to shy away from sort of the shorter poems if you're more interested in writing about those. So this essay could be a little bit shorter. This essay will be an in-depth explication of any poem we are reading this semester, so any poem in the modules you can use. An explication may be thought of as a commentary on what is going on in the poem, how it is working on the reader as the poem moves along. Explication literally means unfolding. So think of how deeper meaning is unfolding to the reader as he or she reads. So poetry, like all of the written arts, are what are called a temporal medium, meaning you can't get it all at once. If you look at a painting on the wall, the artist doesn't control what your eye looks at first. Or if you look at a sculpture, the artist isn't controlling what you see first. But in a song or in a novel or in a poem, in this case, it unrolls in time. So the meaning is also unfolding in time as the poem moves along. You'll notice that that is how I've been going over the poetry in this unit. I read the poem line by line, try to kind of take it in order, and then figure out what is sort of the deeper meaning, or how does the poem make its meaning clear as it moves along through time. So explication is not a line-by-line paraphrase. You're not just putting in your own words what the poem is saying, but seeks to make explicit a poem's deeper meaning, theme, message, lesson, by calling attention as it proceeds to the implication of the words, maybe the function of structure, rhythm, or rhymes, if there are any, the development of contrast, use of irony, any other contributions to meaning. You may notice I'm not asking you to take some elements of poetry, rhyme, rhythm, metaphor, and then to somehow use them in exposing a meaning. You can use those, but you don't have to. You can just let the words speak for themselves, or how the poem was presented. In Hazel Tells Laverne, the way the poem looks on the page, I think, without any capitalization and punctuation, is meant to tell us something about Hazel. And what that something is might be contributing to the meaning. Even though you are dealing with a short poem, you'll probably find some lines prove your point better than others, and you may need to cover briefly or skip entirely, which is okay, the less important ones. Also, it's fine to describe a later line before an earlier one if that seems the best way of handling the explication. Your introduction may be very short, even a single sentence stating your thesis. This is a good approach to such a short explication paper. Make sure it mentions the author, the poem title in quotation marks. These are all short poems, so we're going to use quotation marks, not italics, and what you take to be the poem's overall meaning, its purpose, its theme. I'm a big fan of the model we saw earlier in the semester. If you were in my life class, you would have seen this, but here's a model you can use. While a cursory reading of Caroline Forché's prose poem, The Colonel, may suggest the poem centers around the abuse of power, a closer reading reveals the poem's main concern is fear, showing that those who would use terror to secure power ultimately terrorize themselves, and justifiably so. So what that's doing, and when you read The Colonel, maybe this thesis will make more sense, but it's saying, look, if you read the poem just sort of not in depth, you might get this reading from it, but if you read it more closely, you're going to realize that there is an underlying message in this case. Or maybe theme, maybe the poem doesn't so much have a message as it explores a particular theme or themes. Maybe, say The Colonel, that it explores themes of fear and abuse of power. Okay? Suggestion: after you've established your thesis statement, divide the poem into 4 or 5 segments. This is just a suggestion. It might work for you this way. Then write a paragraph about each segment. Make sure you make it clear to your reader how each segment contributes to what you have said is the meaning, etc. of the poem. So, for example, if you did bitch, you might say that the poem really has 3 parts where the narrator shifts from 3 different emotions. First of all, hostility to desire to be with him, and then finally self-blame. Okay, so that sort of passage through confusing and surprising emotions, you could break the poem into those 3 parts and say, here's part 1, here's emotion 1, here's part 2, emotion 2, here's part 3, emotion 3. Even though it's not broken up by stanzas in that way. You get to break it up if you want to. Your conclusion may also be very brief, and therefore might be the last sentence of your last paragraph. Okay, so just get this tag on sort of the conclusion. If you've been talking about theme, then your conclusion could be, what sort of message the poem conveys through that theme. But you decide what you want to do in your conclusion. Please note, although your explication will, for the most part, move steadily from the beginning to the end of the poem, try to avoid transitions along these lines in line 1, in the second line, in the third line. Instead, transitions such as the poem begins, in the next line, the speaker adds, she then introduces, the next stanza begins with the words. Instead of saying first, second, third, fourth, if you can kind of break it up, that will make your essay sound more polished, but help guide your reader through the poem. Okay, so before you read the draft, complete your final draft, reread the following. You must have an original title that incorporates the poem's title and the author's titles, like Fears and Ears and Carolyn Forcher's The Colonel. If you haven't read the poem yet, that will make more sense after you do read the poem as the title. Use quotation marks for your poem's title. One of your first sentences should mention the title and author, even though it is also in your title. Okay, so I know you're going to mention the author and the title and something about the poem, how you read it, in your title. You still need to, when you start writing your introduction or your thesis, you still have to mention the title and the author in your prose. Not just the title, you have to say them again. Refer to the poem as a poem, a text, a work. It's not a story, it's not a book, it's not a novel. Use first person, I, me, my sparingly, if at all. Do not use second person, you, your at all. Do not confuse the poet with your narrator, so don't say Frost finds himself at a place where two roads diverge. He didn't, as far as I know. His narrator does. Don't say Sandra Cisneros' father cheated on her mother. I don't know that that's true. I know that it's true for her narrator, but let's not start spreading rumors about Sandra Cisneros' father. Use present tense throughout and pay particular attention to the grammar and clarity issues from your previous papers. Why? Because I should probably fix this, shouldn't I? Probably should say your. Good. I'm paying attention. All right. Hope that helps. Take care, everyone. Bye.